Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. If you've already subscribed to our channel, thank you very much. If you haven't, please do. And when you do, please be sure and tap on the notification bell so you'll be notified every time we put up a new video. If you tap the little like button, we appreciate that too. Now in our last video, we got the carburetor mounted on this Panhead. And for those who've not been tuned in all along, this is one ragged old motorcycle, and all we're trying to do is get it up and running for a buddy of mine. And for me, that means I want it tuned well. I want it to run as well as it can. I want the brakes to work. I just want him to be able to kick it over in the morning and go for a ride. Ride to work, whatever it is he needs to do. So that's what it's going to be. It is what it is. It has mismatched cylinder heads. It has a whole lot of mismatched parts. It is what it is, and we're making it percolate. So it's going to be fine, it says here. Anyway, so I've been playing with it a little bit. It's been a little bit of space here between videos. I had to get a pair of gas tanks that would fit on it, and I've had to do a bunch of other little things. But we're getting there. So right now what I'd like to do, and I've been asked about this, no matter how many times I show it, there's so many different combinations that I kind of feel responsible like I should show more combinations. In other words, you get into something and you say, well, what's this? Mike didn't show it like that. Well, there's all kinds of aftermarket parts. So I pulled off one pushrod and realized what was there, and I said, you know, I think we better show this. Okay, so what I'm explaining now, not everything applies to every kind of Harley when we do it. You know, adjusting valves with solid lifters is different than adjusting valves with hydraulic lifters. The early Panheads only had solid lifters up until 1953 when they came out with hydraulic lifters. The hydraulic lifters and pans and shovel heads are the same. The aftermarket ones are different. A lot of guys converted to solid lifters from hydraulics. This one has some conversion lifters in it, and I'd like to show them because we used to put a lot of them in, and people are still running across them. So I pulled one push rod out already, and I'll pull the second one out so we can show it. But this is a very fat aftermarket push rod. The downside of that is that quite often they rub inside the push rod tubes. Kind of nature of the beast. Now the front exhaust push rod is the longest one, and you have to be aware of that. On most aftermarket sets, the front push rod is the longest one. The rear push rod is the next to the longest one, although depending on the brand, it might be the same length as the two intakes. The two intakes are the same length, and if you have three lengths in there, the two in the middle, the two intake push rods are the same length. The rear exhaust may be a little longer or it may be the same, and the front exhaust is the longest. Okay, now this bike, again, having a lot of mix and match parts, it has lifters in it that were designed originally as hydraulic lifters. In other words, they were stock Harley-Davidson hydraulic lifters from 93 up to 84 is the same kind of, from 53 to 84 is the same lifter. And what they did to convert them to hydraulic was to pull out the little hydraulic unit and put in a solid piece right into the same lifter body. And we can see that by pulling this piece out. This is an aftermarket piece that takes the place of the little hydraulic unit that normally goes into that lifter. I hope you can see down in there. But it just goes right back in place of that hydraulic unit. And of course, with the push rod adjusted properly, keeps a little tension on it, so it stays there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull, I've already taken the front exhaust push rod out. I'm going to take the front intake push rod out, and we'll clean this stuff up and put it back in. So let's get this off of here. This is the clip. Now there's all kinds of tools designed and everything to do that, but I've never found it that difficult to do with my hand. So there is the pushrod tube sliding up. And we'll see if we've got that lifter down. I can crank it over by hand here. Yes, it was already down. Now the exhaust just came up right there. Now the intake is coming up. And when that intake drops all the way down, both valves are closed, and now we can adjust them. You know what I forgot to get out was my little thing that holds the pushrod tubes up. Let's see here. So we'll take the lock nut loose. Not too difficult. Once you start it, you can usually do it with your fingers. Okay, there goes the lock nut. Okay, and now we'll back this off. Okay, now we can remove that push rod. Okay, again, we're going to match them up here and see if that front exhaust push rod is longer than the intake push rod, and there it is. Quite a bit. See the difference in that length. So I've laid them here on a rag, and the reason for that is to keep them in order. Now I can put my fingers on these two here and move. See, there's the exhaust again. Now the exhaust closes, the intake opens, and now the intake is dropping down, and I can feel it. That's all the way to the bottom. Okay. Now what we're going to do is clean these pushrod tubes up. The seals are, that one just broke when I went to take it off. Okay. Take this stuff apart, and on one of my favorite things here, isopropyl alcohol. We'll wipe it down. We're not restoring this thing, we're just cleaning things up before we put them back together again. Okay. It looks like a real thumbnail job. Yeah, it is. A little bit of crust and rust and garbage down here. Now, in a perfect world, we'd buy a brand new set. Well, then we'd have an old raggedy bike with a brand new set of pushrod tubes on it. These will match. They'll look good. Okay, now, the outside really wasn't as important as the inside. So we'll take some of this alcohol, spray it inside the inside. Take one of these. And shove it through that tube. We'll just clean it out. It's not that bad, but, you know, can't very well take anything on this bike apart without cleaning it. So we'll take this down here. Just do that. Shock and amazement. Looks pretty good through there. Not bad at all. I'm going to run one more time through it. Can't help myself. Okay. That makes me happy. I did what I was supposed to. And again, they're in order. I'm putting the same one back in where it came from. Gee, by the time I get to the end of this rag, it's coming out pretty clean. Not bad. Okay, the outside looks presentable. The inside is clean. Same thing on the internal tube. Now, I try not to waste anybody's time on these videos, so that's why we're just going to do 2 valves. But we're going to do them so that everything is cleaned up and as right as we can make it with all this old stuff. And I do mean old stuff. Again, there's the outside of the tube. Now we'll get the inside of the tube. Yeah, it's getting in there. There we go. Now we can sit here and turn it. And then pull it through. And that's nice and clean. Is it spotless? No. But it's pretty clean. Okay, now we take the inside pieces out of this one. Let me see if I can spray a little alcohol on it. Oh no, this one's got some real junk on it. Oh, that's a fingernail job there. Okay, that takes care of the outside. Get the top of it here clean. Then we'll get the inside nice and wiped out. All right, now we have it's missing a part, but that's all right. I outthought that one. Okay. Here's the inner part of the tube. Here's the outer collar here. Here's the spring that goes in here. Then, if this is the right size washer, and it is, we can put it on. Next comes the cork. Now be careful putting those on. You don't want to tear them up. So that washer goes against the cork. Against the spring. Then the cork. Then the outer tube. Now that worked pretty well. Now this is the exhaust push rod. And we've got it all ready to go. Now, we'll do the same thing with this intake push rod tube. And it's a real mess. Didn't realize how much of a mess I had here till I took it apart. I usually clean stuff before doing a video, but that's almost phony. This is real. This is what you need to do. This outer stuff got baked on it probably 30, 40 years ago, but it'll come off. Like I said, this is kind of a ragged old bike. I know people always want to call it a rat bike, but this is just a worn old bike that's been a lot of places. Some of them I probably don't want to know about. I didn't say that. Okay. Okay. It's amazing when you get this stuff cleaned up how nice it actually cleans up. This poor baby's just been laying around for quite a while. Laying around doing nothing. Well, we're going to put her to work. Oh, I guess that's putting her to play, isn't it? But I get asked questions about these push rods all the time. Push rods and lifters. And you just have to remember, be sure and say what you're working on, so I don't give you bad information. Okay, now we're going to clean out the inside of this tube. And then we can get on with the job at hand here. There it is. It's going in. And someday it'll come out the other end. There it is. Pretty good. Okay, that one looks good. And we still have this internal one. I'm really glad I had these washers laying around here because it's missing all of them. Yep. All these corks, all this stuff is pretty well shot. And I'm running out of corks too. I'll have to pick up some more tomorrow. That's a good excuse to go for a ride, I think, because they will easily fit in the saddlebag. I didn't figure out all this gluey stuff. That's all right. We don't have an awful lot left on this bike to get done before we're ready to fire it up. I have to get a pair of tanks mounted on it, a little bit of wiring, get the pipes back on it, and pour it full of fluids, hoping they don't all come out the bottom, and maybe clean up the wiring a little bit. And it should be ready to start. Okay. Oh, I have to get a brake pedal welded. That's something I'm going to show when we get to it. The brake pedal has a typical thing that happens. This stud that goes through the bracket breaks off inside the bracket, and you can go down and either order or buy a new one, or you can take it over to your buddy the welder and have him just re-weld it on the inside. And I'll probably show that, not because it's any kind of magic, but because it's not an expensive fix. It's just not. And to make a big deal out of it's kind of a shame. So let's see, we got this one and this one. Now we need to do this one. Get these two adjusted in a minute here and get on with it. I just can't put them back together that dirty. And I think I'll speed the process up a bit here with a screwdriver. There we go. And that does speed things up a bunch. All right. So now, this spring doesn't really matter. It's enclosed and it's not contaminating the inside of the motor. So let's see. We'll take this one and drop it right there. And let's see, we're going to have that one and that one. And the washer, this little flat washer that keeps that spring from cutting into the cork. That one doesn't seem to want to go on there. That one will. I think so. No, yes, yes, no. There is something wrong with that one, because it won't fit, because this one did, and this one didn't. So let's see what I've got here. I may have mixed and matched some of these washers myself. Now those are the same size, all three of them. So now, I want to see what the deal is. Is that just warped? It will not fit. So I'll have to pull another one out of stock tomorrow, see if I can find one. So in the meantime, what we'll just do is adjust this front exhaust valve real quick. We'll put a cork right up in here in the rocker, into the cylinder head. Just press it in my fingers. And we got to put a new one here in the bottom, which is a larger one. And that goes right in there. And now, this is our long one. This is the exhaust. Again, you want to check yourself over and over again, not make a mistake there. Put that push rod right up in there, and I can feel it going into the socket on the rocker arm. Now down here, I'm extending that push rod, knowing that this lifter is all the way bottomed. And I'm going to take the lock nut and move it up there. Sometimes these move easily with your fingers, and sometimes they don't. Okay? Now notice that I can still rotate it. I think Mike's got either a cold or an allergy going. Probably an allergy. The season just changed. Okay, now, this you might have to do a couple or 3 times. We'll get one wrench on here. And we'll tighten the lock nut from down here. Okay, now I just barely tightened it. And now that push rod feels too loose. Remember, this is not a hydraulic one, this is a solid. So what are we going to do? We're going to take this here, we're going to extend it a little more. Yeah. Then we're going to extend it a little more. Remember, I didn't tighten that lock nut completely. Okay, now it feels pretty good. There's no up and down movement, yet I can still move it by hand. Just barely. Okay, now that may have made it a little too loose. We'll tighten it again one more time. Just back it out a little bit. And then tighten that nut. Yeah, too loose. We're going to get on here with a 7/16 onto the lock nut. And we're going to extend this bottom foot here just a little bit. That's better. Do it again. That feels pretty good to me. So we're going to do it just a little bit more. That's getting pretty tight. So now when we tighten that lock nut, it's going to back it off just a hair. I mean just a hair. And that's going to be pretty good. So here goes that lock nut. Make sure that one's on there. There. Okay, now that feels perfect. There's no up and down movement, yet I can still rotate it with my fingers. Maybe just a little bit loose. But what I'm going to do is when I start this thing, I'll listen to all of them, I'll run it, and then I'll probably go back and do one more fine adjustment on it. But there it is. That's the front exhaust. The front intake will be the same. I need to get one of those washers before I can put it in there. Well, for now, that's the way all 4 of them are. After I get the front ones done, then I go on to the back ones and do the same thing. Same way to rotate it, same way to bottom the lifters. And remember, these are for solid lifters. Okay? So I will go get washers and corks and things tomorrow. and get back on this thing. And for now, I think I've explained that pretty well. I hope so. And we'll be getting more stuff done. And until then, I'll see you out on the road.